from Human Events. Moscow bombs Kyiv, killing at least 9, injuring dozens as peace talks hit the rocks. Now, why did they hit the rocks? Here's a tweet from Marco Rubio. Politico wrote, White House debates lifting sanctions on Russian energy assets, Nord Stream. The debate pits Steve Witkoff against State Department and U.S. energy export proponents. Rubio says this is unequivocally false. Neither Steve Witkoff nor I have had any conversations about lifting sanctions against Russia as part of the deal with Ukraine. This is journalistic malpractice. If Politico has an ounce of integrity, they will fully retract this piece of fiction. So what do you think happens if you're Zelenskyy and you see a report in one of the preeminent political newspapers in the United States saying that behind your back, the U.S. State Department has cut a deal with Russia or wants to? Zelenskyy says, no deal. And then what happens? Russia bombs their capital.
Yeah, but I mean...
The media is making the war worse. That's the point.
I mean, I think you're probably right. But Russia hasn't made any... They've done nothing to signal that they're going to go to the, to actually begin negotiations. The negotiations that Rubio's had with Russia have been largely fruitless. And Russia's in a position now where there's not a lot of reason for them to. If it seems like they want to wait out the U.S. because the U.S. has said if we can't. Marco Rubio said this: if we can't get a deal, then we're gonna have to step away from the table without any kind of signaling that they're going to send more money to Ukraine to support Ukraine. So Russia's like, well, we'll just wait him out.
So Zelenskyy is pro-Russia?
Zelenskyy? No.
Well, by not doing the deal with the U.S.
No, I'm saying Putin isn't doing the deal.
Right. By Zelenskyy not doing the deal because he backed off from the peace agreement. This then, the U.S. is going to pull out of the war. And then Russia gets to walk on in.
Well, I guess the logic is that the more money and the arms that were sent over the Ukraine, the more territory and men and women and civilians and soldiers that Ukraine ended up losing. And this has been an intractable war now going on 3 years. I think President Trump is looking at like a different perspective of how to end this thing. And Zelenskyy wants to not come to the peace.
Yeah, Zelenskyy keeps talking about things like taking back Crimea, which is not even on the table. It's a ridiculous idea to think that that's going to happen. Russia's totally entrenched in Ukraine or in Crimea. They've got all Russian speaking people in that area now. That's not going back to Ukraine. So to even mention that, like the Trump administration is totally right. To mention that stuff is detrimental to the idea of any kind of negotiations. But unless they'll all actually get to the table, what are you going to do?
So what do you think, considering the instability and turmoil in the United States politically? Russia's got no incentive to negotiate because the deep state will block Trump?
I mean, I don't know that the deep state will block Trump, but Russia doesn't have any incentive to negotiate because they're winning the war, right?
Well,
like there's the argument that Ukraine is holding their own and blah, blah, blah. I don't buy it for a second. Russia's beating the absolute hell out of them.
This is the concern that I had before the election, that it had gotten to a point where Trump couldn't stop it. A couple of years ago, my opinion was if Trump was in office right now, the war would end. If Trump had stayed in office, there'd be no war. But at this point, I think they'll make a good point. Russia's attitude may be Trump doesn't want the war. His base doesn't want the war. And so he cannot advance. I can do whatever I want now. The war has gotten so entrenched. I feel like the strike on Kyiv was Russia saying, we haven't even begun.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. Russia's got nukes. They've got nuclear artillery. That's low yield weapons that can be fired from, say, like a howitzer. And they haven't used any of it. If Russia wanted to crush Ukraine, they would. So this is the problem now with Trump demanding peace. Ukraine, I guess, just pattering and not getting, Zelenskyy leaves. He gets in that fight with Trump and then the deal's frozen or whatever. Now he's backing away. And Russia's attitude is probably, this is perfect.
Look, yeah. I think what's going on here, I think President Trump's looking at the big picture here. I think he views China as the biggest threat to America, both financially, economically, militarily. He sees Russia as a massive player in that relationship between Russia and China. I think he wants to separate them militarily and economically. This whole story about the U.S. lifting sanctions on Russian energy, my background's in energy. Trump is pro-U.S. shale, pro-exporting that LNG to the European market. There's no way that Trump is going to lift sanctions while he's trying to pump U.S. energy to the European market. So that said, then, of course, you have the Iranian issue where Russia is massively implicated in the Iran nuclear agreement. They're protecting Iran. They have massive economic agreements with them, military agreements. So Russia's a major player that Trump, in many ways, has to deal with to solve those outstanding issues that affect America much more so than a territorial dispute between East and West Ukraine.
Yeah, as much as people will talk about Ukraine as being some kind of vital, country for the U.S. and if we don't, we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, then he's going to take Poland and stuff. I think that's all posturing. I think that Russia and Ukraine have a long history. It's not good for Europe, for Ukraine to be, a part of Russia, but I do think that it stops because really the catalyst was the idea of Ukraine joining NATO. That's what started this whole thing, the signaling from the Obama administration that they would allow it. There's strategic things when it comes to the Black Sea and Crimea and the ports, but really Russia wants to make sure that Ukraine doesn't join NATO. And I think that otherwise, I don't think that Russia has any kind of designs for the rest of Europe because they're all NATO countries currently. So I think that's all just posturing.
So where do we end up? I mean, what's Trump's priority got to be then?
Trump's priority has to be China. China's the biggest problem right now. There's no technology race with Russia, right? In the future, in the next 5 years, AI and power generation are the two biggest issues that the United States has to win on. The U.S. has to beat China when it comes to AI. And China doesn't have any compunction with using the CRISPR technology on their own soldiers. They're looking to create, genetically modified bionic soldiers, and that's not like some kind of. At one point it was science fiction, but nowadays it's not science fiction anymore.
We do have an update. It's actually not 9, that's 12. And Reuters is saying that Zelenskyy claimed it was a North Korean strike, missile. It was a Russian strike, but it was a North Korean missile. What I will add to the China thing is we've known now for like a decade that China has been genetically engineering super soldiers.
What exactly does that mean?
It means that they take the embryos and they edit the genes to guarantee specific outcomes like more bone density, more muscle mass, taller, stronger, smarter, etc.
It's like Universal Soldier with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Absolutely.
It's like
Captain China.
Well, I mean, think about this, right? So one of the biggest problems that paratroopers in the United States have faced is they end up messing up their knees. Like when you're not the guys that are like the cool guys jumping out of the plane where they can coast themselves down, but regular airborne, they jump out and they're static line. So they jump out and it automatically opens. They don't have a whole lot of control over it and they can't slow down when they land. So after 5 years or 10 years, everybody that's airborne that jumps a lot has bad knees. Well, if you can increase the bone density and make the cartilage in between your knees, if you can make it springier, then you can make sure you'll have fewer dudes that land and get injured when they land, and that means they're a more effective combat troop.
That's going to be stem cells.
I mean, maybe. I'm not sure, but the point
because cartilage doesn't regenerate as well over time. It wears down and then is gone. So long as there is still some cartilage in the knee, they can inject stem cells, which will then mold into the cartilage. I don't know. Certainly, they can make the legs stronger and stuff, but genetic engineering for something like that problem is a bit specific. You're better off engineering that problem away. What they're going to do is just make 6'5" ultra ripped dudes who never have to work out. And they're going to
5 Chinese. That's hilarious.
Yep. And
everybody's mad.
I got to be honest, probably not 6 feet. I imagine it might be 5'8", 5'9". You don't want to be too tall, actually. Unless actually they just genetically engineer it to work better. Shorter people live longer. So if they're trying to create super soldiers, they're going to want like an average height for lifespan. And they're going to want to they're going to be able to do whatever they want.
But the point is, this is the future, right? So there's going to be significant competition between the U.S. and China about AI, about these types of technologies. Russia is not a leader on these technologies. Russia copies. I mean, China does a lot of copying too, to be honest with you, but they do have innovation too. There's a lot of Chinese and a lot of them are brilliant. And they have no problem with sending students over to steal intellectual property. You'll have Chinese students come over, they'll go to college, they'll go to MIT, they go to these to STEM fields, they learn as much as they can, and then back to China with that information. And this is the future. As much as Russia is a serious, the war in Russia and Crimea and Ukraine can be a problem for the U.S. and for our foreign policy, it is not even in the same realm as China is. Donald Trump as a China hawk, that's the most forward-thinking Donald Trump has been, is in the way that he sees China, not just economically, but as a military threat as well.
Yeah, but look what sanctions really accomplished with Russia, right? They only basically drove these countries to create BRICS, right? To destroy the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. It weakened Russia to the extent that China took advantage of them because they had no other alternative market to sell their energy to, their weapons to. India stopped buying them, or India still buys them, but they went all to China. So that's really what happened here. China took full advantage of it. China's stronger than ever.
Yep.
And I think Donald Trump understands that, and that's why this tariff war is ongoing. And we're almost at a standstill because of China's strength at this point.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.